The Corner Shop by C.L.Ray and read by Chris Halton. Peter Wood's executors found their task a very easy one. He had left his affairs in perfect order. The only surprise yielded by his tidy writing table was a sealed envelope on which was written, "Not wishing to be bothered by well-meaning research societies, I have never shown the enclosed to anyone, but after my death all are welcome to read what is, to the best of my knowledge, a true story." The manuscript bears a date 3 years prior to the death of the writer, and is as follows. I have long wished to write down an experience of my youth. I shall not attempt any diagnosis as to its nature. I draw no conclusions. I merely record certain facts. At least, as such, these incidents presented themselves to my consciousness. One evening, shortly after I had been called to the bar, I was rather dejectedly returning to my lodgings, wishing I could afford a theatre ticket, when my attention was drawn to the brightly lit window of a shop. Having an uneducated love of bric-a-brac, and remembering an unavoidable wedding present, I grasped the handle of the door which, opening with one of those cheerful clanking bells, admitted me into large rambling premises thickly crowded with all the traditional litter of a curiosity shop. Fragments of armour, pewter pots, dark distorting mirrors, church vestments, flower pictures, brass kettles, chairs, tables, chests, chandeliers, all were here. But in spite of the heterogeneous confusion, there was none of the dingy, dusty gloom one associates with such collections. The room was brightly lit, and a crackling fire leapt up the chimney. The atmosphere was warm and cheerful. Very agreeable I found it after the cold, dank fog outside. At my entrance, a young woman and a child, by their resemblance obviously sisters, had risen from 2 armchairs. Bright, bustling, gaily dressed, they were curiously unlike the type of person who usually presides over that particular sort of wares. A flower shop would have seemed a more appropriate setting. How wonderful of them to keep their premises so clean, I thought, as I wished them good evening. Their smiling faces made a very pleasing impression on me, one of comfortable, serene well-being, and though the grown-up sister was most courteous in showing me the crowded treasures and displayed knowledge and appreciation, she struck me as quite indifferent as to whether I made any purchase or not. Her manner was really more that of a custodian than of a saleswoman. Finding a beautiful piece of Sheffield plate very moderately priced, I decided that here was the very present for my friend. The child deftly converted my purchase into a brown paper parcel. Explaining to her elder sister that I was without sufficient cash, I asked if she would take a cheque. "Certainly," she answered, briskly producing pen and ink. "Will you please make it out to the corner curio shop?" It was with conscious reluctance that I set out into the saffron fog. "Good evening, sir. Always pleased to see you at any time," rang out the girl's pleasant voice, a voice so agreeable that I left almost with a sense of having made a friend. I suppose it must have been about a week later that, as I walked home one very cold evening, fine powdery snow brushing against my face, and a cutting wind tearing down the streets, I remembered the welcoming warmth of the cheerful corner curio shop, and determined to revisit it. I found myself in the very street, and there, yes, there was the very corner. It was with a sense of disappointment, out of all proportion to the event, that I found the shop wearing that baffling, so to speak, shut-eyed appearance, and saw that a piece of cardboard on which was printed the word "closed" hung from the handle. A bitter gust of wind whistled round the corner. My wet trousers flapped dismally against my chapped ankles. I longed for the warmth and glow within, and felt annoyingly thwarted. Rather childishly, for I was certain the door was locked, I grasped the handle and shook it. To my surprise, the handle turned in my hand, but not in answer to its pressure. The door was pulled open from inside, and I found myself peering into the dimly lit countenance of a very old and frail-looking little man. "Please to come in, sir," said a gentle, rather tremulous voice, and soft footsteps shuffled away in front of me. It is impossible to describe the altered aspect of the place. I assumed that the electric light had fused. for the darkness of the large room was only thinned by 2 guttering candles, and in the dim, wavering light the jumble of furniture, formerly brightly lit, now loomed towering and mysterious, and cast weird, almost menacing shadows. The fire was out, only one faintly glowering ember told that any had lately been alive. Other evidence there was none, for the grim cold of the atmosphere was such as I had never experienced. The phrase "it struck chill" is laughably inadequate. In retrospect, the street seemed almost agreeable. In its biting cold there had at least been something exhilarating. The atmosphere was now as gloomy as it had previously been genial. I felt a strong impulse to leave immediately, but the surrounding darkness thinned, and I saw that the old man was busily lighting candles here and there. "Anything I can show you, sir?" he quavered as he spoke, approaching me with a lighted taper in his hand. I now saw him comparatively distinctly, and his appearance made an indescribable impression on me. Rembrandt flitted through my mind. Who else could have suggested the strange shadows on that time-worn face? Tired is a word we lightly use. Never had I known what the word might mean, till I stared at that exhausted countenance, the ineffable patient weariness of the withered face, the eyes, which seemed as extinct as the fire, save for a feeble glow as of some purpose, and the wan frailty of the figure. The words dust and ashes, strayed through my brain. On my first visit you may remember that I had been impressed by the incongruous cleanliness of the place. The queer fancy now struck me that this old man was like an accumulation of all the dust one might have expected to see scattered over such precincts. In truth, he looked scarcely more solid than a mere conglomeration of dust that might be dispersed at a breath or a touch. What a queer old creature to be employed by those healthy, well-to-do looking girls! He must, I thought, be some old retainer kept on out of charity. "Anything I can show you, sir?" repeated the old man. His voice had little more body than the tearing of a cobweb, and yet there was a curious, almost pleading insistence in it, and his eyes were fixed on me in a wan yet devouring stare. I wanted to leave. Definitely I wanted to go. The proximity of this pitiable old man depressed me. I felt wretchedly dispirited, but involuntarily murmuring, "Thank you, I'll look round." I found myself following his frail form and absent-mindedly inspecting various objects, temporarily illuminated by his trembling taper. The chill silence, only broken by the tired shuffle of his carpet slippers, got on my nerves. "Very cold night, isn't it?" I hazarded. "Cold, is it? Cold, yes, I dare say." In his grey voice was the apathy of extreme initiation. "Been at this job long?" I asked, dully peering at an old 4-poster bed. "A long, long time." The answer came softly as a sigh, and as he spoke, time seemed no longer a matter of days, weeks, months, years, but something that stretched immeasurably. I resented the old man's exhaustion and melancholy, the infection of which was so unaccountably weighing down my own spirits. "How long, O Lord, how long?" I said as jauntily as possible, adding with odious jocularity, "Old age pension about due what?" No response. In silence we moved across to the other side of the room. "Quaint piece that," said my guide, picking up a little grotesque frog that was lying on a shelf amongst numerous other small objects. It seemed to be made of some substance similar to jade, and, rather struck by its uncouth appearance, I took it from the old man's hand. It was strikingly cold. "I think it's rather fun," I said. "How much?" "£half-a-crown, sir," whispered the old man, glancing up at my face. His voice had no more body than the sliding of dust, but in his eyes there was an unmistakable gleam of eagerness. "Is that all? I'll have it," said I. "Don't bother to pack up old Anthony Rowland. I'll put him in my pocket. £half-a-crown, did you say? Here it is." In giving the old man the coin, I inadvertently touched his extended palm. I could scarcely suppress a start. I have said the frog struck cold, but its substance was tepid compared to that desiccated skin. I cannot describe the chill sensation received in that second's contact. Poor old fellow, I thought. He's not fit to be about in this cold, lonely place. I wonder at those kind-looking girls allowing such an old wreck to struggle on. "Good night," I said. "Good night, sir. Thank you, sir," quavered the feeble old voice. He closed the door behind me. Turning my head as I breasted the driving snow, I saw his form, scarcely more solid than shadow, outlined against the candlelight. His face was pressed against the big glass pane. I imagined his tired, patient eyes peering after his vanishing customer. Somehow I was unable to dismiss the thought of that old man from my mind. Long after I was in bed and courting sleep, I saw that maze of wrinkles, his ravaged face, and his great initiated eyes like lifeless planets staring at me, and in their steady stare there seemed a sort of question. Yes, I was unaccountably perturbed by his personality, and even after I achieved sleep my dreams were full of my strange acquaintance, haunted, I suppose, by a sense of his infinite tiredness. In my dream I was trying to force him to rest, to lie down. But no sooner did I succeed in laying his frail form on the four-poster bed I had noticed in the shop. Only now it seemed more like a grave than a bed, and the brocade coverlet had turned into sods of turf. Then he would slip from my grasp and totteringly set forth on his rambles around the shop. On and on I chased him, down endless avenues of weird furniture, but still he eluded me, and now the dim shop seemed to stretch on and on immeasurably, to merge into an infinity of sunless, airless space, until at length I myself sank, breathless and exhausted, onto the four-poster grave. The next morning I received an urgent summons to my mother's sick bed, and in the anxiety of the ensuing week, the episode of the corner curio shop was banished from my mind. As soon as the invalid was declared out of danger, I returned to my dreary lodging, dejectedly engaged in adding up my petty household accounts and wondering where on earth I was to find the money to pay next quarter's rent. I was agreeably surprised by a visit from an old schoolfellow, at that time practically the only friend I possessed in London. He was employed by one of the best-known firms of fine art dealers and auctioneers. After a few minutes' conversation, he rose in search of a light. My back was turned to him. I heard the sharp scratch of a match, followed by propitiating noises to his pipe. These were suddenly broken off by an exclamation. "Good God, man!" he shouted. "Where in the name of trade did you get this?" Turning round, I saw that he had snatched up my purchase of the other night, the funny little frog whose presence on my mantelpiece I had practically forgotten. He was holding it under the gas jet, closely scrutinizing it through a small magnifying glass, and his hands were shaking with excitement. "Where did you get this?" he repeated. "Have you any idea what it is?" Briefly I told him that rather than leave a shop empty-handed, I had bought the frog for £0.50. "For £0.50, he echoed. "My dear fellow, I can't swear to it, but I believe you've had one of those amazing pieces of luck one hears about. Unless I'm very much mistaken, this is a piece of jade of the Shire dynasty." To my ignorance, these words conveyed little. "Do you mean it's worth money?" "Worth money? Phew!" he ejaculated. "Look here. Will you leave this business to me? Let me have the thing for my firm to do the best they can by you. Today's Monday. I shall be able to get it into Thursday's auction." Knowing I could implicitly trust my friend, I readily agreed to his proposal. Carefully enwrapping the frog in cotton wool, he departed. Friday morning I received the shock of my life. Shock does not necessarily imply bad news, and I can assure you that for some seconds after opening the one envelope lying on my dingy breakfast tray, the room spun round and round me. The envelope contained an invoice from Messrs. Spunk, fine art dealers and auctioneers, to sale of sheer jade £2,000, less 10% commission, £1,800. And there, neatly folded, made out to Peter Wood, Esquire, was Messrs. Spunk's cheque for £1,800. For some time I was completely bewildered. My friend's words had raised hopes that my chance purchase might facilitate the payment of next quarter's rent, might even provide for a whole year's rent, but that so large a sum was involved had never even crossed my mind. Could it be true, or was it some hideous joke? Surely it was, in the trite phrase, much, much too good to be true. It was not the sort of thing that happened to oneself. Still feeling physically dizzy, I rang up my friend. The normality of his voice and the heartiness of his congratulations convinced me as to the truth of my astounding fortune. It was no joke, no dream. I, Peter Wood, whose bank account was at present £20 overdrawn, and who possessed no securities save shares to the extent of £150, by a sheer fluke, now held in my hand a piece of paper convertible into 1,800 golden sovereigns. I sat down to think, to try to realise, to readjust. From a jumble of plans, problems and emotions, one fact emerged crystal clear. Obviously, I could not take advantage of the girl's ignorance, or of her poor old caretaker's incompetence. I could not accept this amazing gift from fate simply because I had bought a treasure for £5. Clearly, I must return at least half of the sum to my unconscious benefactors. Otherwise, I should feel I had robbed them almost as much as though I had broken into their shop like a thief in the night. I remembered their pleasant, open countenances. What fun to astonish them with the wonderful news! I felt a strong impulse to rush to the shop, but having for once a case in court, I was obliged to go to the Temple. Endorsing Messrs. Spunk's cheque, I addressed it to my bankers, and consulting the flyleaf of my chequebook, made out one to the corner curio shop for £900. This I placed in my pocket, determined to call at the corner shop on my way home. It was late before I was free to leave the law courts, and on arriving at the shop, though somewhat disappointed, I was not greatly surprised to find that it was again shut, with the notice closed slung over the handle. Even supposing the old caretaker to be on duty, there was no particular point in seeing him. My business was with his mistress. So, deciding to postpone my visit to the following day, I was just on the point of hurrying home when, as though I was expected, the door opened, and there on the threshold stood the old man, peering out into the darkness. "Anything I can do for you, sir?" His voice was even queerer than before. I now realized that I had dreaded re-encountering him, but I felt irresistibly compelled to enter. The atmosphere was as grimly cold as on my last visit. I found myself actually shivering. Several candles, obviously only just lit, were burning, and by their glimmering light I saw the old man's grey gaze questioningly fixed upon me. What a face! I had not exaggerated its weirdness. Never had I seen so singular, so striking a being. No wonder I had dreamt of him. I wished he hadn't opened the door. "Anything I can show you tonight, sir?" he rather tremulously inquired. "No, thanks. I have come about that thing you sold me the other day. I find it's of great value. Please tell your mistress that I will pay her a proper price for it tomorrow." As I spoke, there spread over the old man's face the most wonderful smile. Smile I use for lack of a better word. But how convey any idea of the beauty of the indefinable expression that now transfigured that time-worn face? Tender triumph, gentle rapture. It was frost yielding to sunshine. Never before have I witnessed the thawing of thickly frozen grief, the dawn radiance of attainment. For the first time I had some inkling of the meaning of the word beatitude. Impossible to describe the impression made on me by that transfigured face. The moment, as it were, brimmed over. Time ceased, and I became conscious of infinite things. The silence of the shop was now broken by that gathering sound of an old clock about to break into speech. I turned my head towards one of those wonderful pieces of medieval workmanship, a Nuremberg grandfather clock. From a recess beneath its exquisitely painted face, quaint figures emerged, and while one struck a bell, others daintily stepped through a minuet. My attention was riveted by the pretty spectacle, and not till the last sounds had trembled into silence did I turn my head. I found myself alone. The old man had disappeared. Surprised at his leaving me, I looked all round the large room. Oddly enough, the fire, which I had supposed to be dead, had flared into unexpected life and was now casting a cheerful glow. but neither fire nor candlelight showed any trace of the old caretaker. He had vanished. "Hello, hello," I called out interrogatively. No answer. No sound save the loud ticking of clocks and the busy crackling of the fire. I walked all around the room. I even looked into the four-poster bed of which I had dreamt. I then saw that there was a smaller adjoining room, and seizing a candle, I resolved to explore it. At the far end I discerned a small staircase, obviously leading up to a sort of gallery that surrounded the room. The old man must have withdrawn into some upstairs lair. I would follow him. I groped my way to the foot of the stairs and began to ascend, but the steps creaked beneath my feet. I had a feeling of crumbling woodwork. My candle went out. Cobwebs brushed against my face. To continue was most uninviting. I desisted. After all, what did it matter? Let the old man hide himself. I had given my message. Best be gone. But the main room to which I had returned had now become quite warm and cheerful. How could I ever have thought it sinister? And it was with a distinct sense of regret that I left the shop. I felt balked. I would have liked to see more of that irradiating smile. Dear, strange old man. How could I ever have fancied that I feared him? The next Saturday I was free to go straight to the shop. On the way there my mind was agreeably occupied in anticipating the cordial welcome the grateful sisters were sure to give me. As the clank of the bell announced my opening of the door, the two girls, who were busily dusting their treasures, turned their heads to see who came at so unusually early an hour. Recognizing me, to my surprise, they bowed pleasantly, but quite casually, as though to a mere acquaintance. With the fairy tale bond between us, I had expected quite a different sort of greeting. I at once guessed that they had not yet heard the astounding news, and when I said, "I've brought the cheque," I saw that my surmise was correct. Their faces expressed blank uncomprehension. "Cheque?" echoed the grown-up sister. "What cheque?" "For the frog I bought the other day." "The frog? What frog? I only remember you buying a piece of Sheffield plate." I saw they knew nothing, not even of my second visit to their shop. By degrees I told them the whole story. They were bewildered with astonishment. The elder sister seemed quite dazed. "But I can't understand it. I can't understand it," she repeated. "Holmes isn't even supposed to admit anyone in our absence, far less to sell things. He just comes here as caretaker on the evenings when we leave early, and he's only supposed to stay till the night policeman comes onto his beat. I can't believe he let you in and never even told us he'd sold you something. It's too extraordinary. What time was it?" "Round about 7, I should think," I answered. "He generally leaves about 6:30, said the girl. "But I suppose the policeman must have been late." "It was later when I came yesterday." "Did you come again yesterday?" she asked. Briefly I told her of my visit and the message I had left with the caretaker. "What an incredible thing!" she exclaimed. "I can't begin to understand it, but we shall soon hear his explanation. I'm expecting him in at any moment now. He comes in every morning to sweep the floors." At the prospect of meeting the remarkable old man again, I felt an appreciable thrill of excitement. How would he look in the strong daylight? Would he smile again? "He's very old, isn't he?" I hazarded. "Old, yes, I suppose he is getting rather old, but it's a very easy job. He's a good, honest fellow. I can't understand his doing this sort of thing on the sly. I'm afraid we've been rather slack in our cataloguing lately. I wonder if he's been selling odds and ends for himself. Oh no, I can't bear to think of it. By the way, can you remember whereabouts this frog was?" I pointed to the shelf from which the caretaker had picked up the piece of jade. "Oh, from that assortment. It's a lot I bought the other day for next to nothing, and I haven't sorted or priced them yet. I can't remember seeing a frog. Oh, what an incredible thing to happen." At this moment the telephone rang. She raised the receiver to her ear and spoke down the instrument. Hello, yes, it's Miss Wilton speaking. Yes, Mrs. Holmes, what do you want?" There was a few seconds' pause, and then in startled tones her voice went on. Dead? But how? Why? Oh, I am sorry." After a few more words, she replaced the receiver and turned to us, her eyes full of tears. "Fancy," she said, "poor old Holmes, the caretaker, is dead. When he got home yesterday evening, he complained of pain, and he died in the middle of the night. Heart failure. No one had any idea there was anything the matter with him. Oh, poor Mrs. Holmes, what will she do? We must go round and see her at once." Both girls were very much upset, and saying that I would soon return, I thought it best to leave. A hauntingly singular old man had made so vivid an impression upon me that I felt deeply moved by the news of his sudden death. How strange that I should have been, except for his wife, the last person to speak with him. No doubt the fatal pain had seized him in my very presence, and that was why he had left me so abruptly and without a word. Had death already brushed against his consciousness, that ineffable irradiating smile? Was that the beginning of the peace that passes all understanding? I returned to the corner curio shop the next day. I told them all the details of the sale of the fabulous frog and presented the cheque I had drawn out. Here I met with unexpected opposition. The sisters showed great unwillingness to accept the money. It was, they said, all mine, and they had no need of it. "You see," explained Miss Wilton, "my father had a flair for this business, amounting to a sort of genius, and made quite a large fortune. When he became too old to carry on the shop, we kept it open out of sentiment and for the sake of occupation. But we don't need to make any profit out of it." At last I prevailed upon them to accept the money, if only to spend it on the various charities in which they were interested. It was a relief to my mind when the matter was thus settled. The strange coincidence of the frog was a bond between us, and in the course of our amicable arguments we had become very friendly. I got into the way of dropping in quite often. In fact, I grew rather to rely on the sympathetic companionship of these two bright girls, and became quite at my ease with them. I never forgot the impression made on me by the old man, and often questioned the girls about their poor caretaker, but they had nothing of much interest to tell me. They just described him as an old dear who had been in their father's service as long as they could remember. No further light was thrown on his sale of the frog. Naturally, they didn't like to question his widow. One evening, when I had been having tea in the inner room with the elder sister, I picked up an album of photographs. Turning over its pages, I came on a remarkably fine likeness of the old man. There before me was the strange, striking countenance, but obviously this photograph had been taken many years before I saw him. The face was much fuller and had not yet acquired the wearied, fragile look I so vividly remembered. But what magnificent eyes he had! Certainly there was something extraordinarily impressive about the man. I stared at the faded photograph. "What a splendid photograph of poor old Holmes," I said. "Photograph of Holmes? I'd no idea there was one," she answered. "Let's see." As I approached with the open book, the younger sister looked in through the open door. "I'm off to the movies now," she called out. "Father's just rung up to say he'll be round in about a quarter of an hour to have a look at that Sheraton sideboard." "All right, I'll be here and very glad to have his opinion," said Miss Wilton, taking the album from my hand. There were several photographs on the page at which I had opened the book. "I don't see anything of old Holmes," she said. I pointed out the photograph. "That!" she exclaimed. "Why, that's my dear father." "Your father?" I gasped. "Yes, I can't imagine two people much more unlike. It must have been very dark in the shop when you saw Holmes." Yes, it was very dark," I quickly said to gain time in which to think, for I felt quite bewildered with surprise. No degree of darkness could account for any such mistake. I had no moment's doubt as to the identity of him I had taken for the caretaker with the man whose photograph I now held in my hand. But what an amazing, unaccountable affair! Her father! Why on earth should he have been in the shop unknown to his daughters? And for what possible purpose had he concealed his sale of the frog? And when he heard of its fabulous value, why leave the girls under the impression that it was Holmes, the dead caretaker, who had sold it? Had he been ashamed to confess his own inadvertence? Or was it possible that the girls had never told him? wishing perhaps to keep their sudden wealth a secret. What strange family intrigue was this into which I had stumbled? If the father had determined thus to keep his actions in the dark, I had better not precipitate any exposure. Instinct bade me hold my tongue. The younger sister had announced his approaching visit. Would he recognize me? "It's a splendid face," I said, resolving on reserve. "Isn't it?" she said with pleased eagerness. "Isn't it clever and strong? Yes, I remember when that photograph was taken. It was just before he got religion." The girl spoke as though she regarded religion as a regrettable indisposition. "Did he suddenly become very religious?" "Yes," she said reluctantly. "Poor father. He made friends with a priest and he became so changed. He was never the same again." From the sort of break in the girl's voice, I guessed she thought her father's reason had been affected. Did not this explain the whole affair? On the 2 occasions when I saw him, was he not wandering in mind as well as in body? Did his religion make him unhappy, I ventured to ask, for I was anxious to get more light on the strange being before I re-encountered him. "Yes, dreadfully." The girl's eyes were full of tears. "You see, it was—" She hesitated, and after a glance at me went on. "There's really no reason why I shouldn't tell you. I've come to regard you as a real friend. Poor father got to think he had done very wrong. He couldn't quiet his conscience. You remember my telling you of his extraordinary flair? Well, his fortune was really founded on 3 marvellous strokes of business. He had the same sort of luck you had here the other day. That's why I'm telling you. It seems such an odd coincidence." "Please go on," I urged. "Well, you see, on 3 separate occasions he bought for a few shillings objects that were of immense value. Only, unlike you, he knew what he was about. The money he realized on their sale came as no surprise to him. Unlike you, he did not then see any obligation to make it up to the ignorant people who had thrown away fortunes. After all, most dealers wouldn't, would they?" She paused, then continued. "Well, father grew richer and richer. Years after, he met this priest, and then he seemed to go all sort of morbid. He came to think that our wealth was founded on what was really no better than theft. Bitterly, he reproached himself for having taken advantage of those 3 men's ignorance and allowed them to chuck away their fortunes. Unfortunately, in each case, he succeeded in discovering what had ultimately happened to those he called his victims. Most unfortunately, all 3 men had died in destitution. This discovery made him incurably miserable. 2 of these men had died without leaving any children, and no relations could be found. He traced the son of the 3rd to America, but there he had died, leaving no family. So poor father could find no means of making reparation. That was what he longed for, to make reparation. This preyed and preyed on him until, in my opinion, his poor dear mind became unhinged. As religion took stronger and stronger hold on him, he got a queer sort of notion into his head. A regular obsession, a complex they would call it now. The next best thing to doing a good action, he would say, is to provide someone else with the opportunity for doing one, to give him his cue, so to speak. In our sins, Christ is crucified afresh. I must be the cause of 3 good actions corresponding to my own bad ones. In no other way can I expiate my crimes against Christ, for crimes they were. In vain we argued with him, saying he had only done as nearly all men would have done. It had no effect. "Other men must judge for themselves. I have done what I know to be wrong," he would mournfully repeat. He got more and more fixed in his idea. Real religious mania it became. Being determined to find 3 human beings who would, by their good actions, as it were, cancel the pain caused to divinity by what he considered his 3 crimes, he now busied himself in finding insignificant-looking treasures which he would offer to the public for a few shillings. Poor old father! I shall never forget his joy when one day a man returned a piece of porcelain he had bought for 5 shillings and discovered to be worth £500, saying, "I think you must have made a mistake." "Just as you did, bless you." 5 years later a similar thing occurred, and he was, oh, so radiant. 2 of humanity's crimes cancelled, he felt. Then came years and years of weary disappointment. "I shall never rest until I find the third," was what he always said. Here the girl began to cry, hiding her face behind her hands and murmuring something about, "Too late, too late." I heard the doorbell ring. "How he must have suffered," I said. "I'm so glad I had the luck to be the third." She withdrew her hands from her face and stared at me. "And I'm so glad I'm going to meet him again," I said as I heard footsteps approaching. "Meet him!" she echoed in amazement as the footsteps drew near. "Yes, I may stay, mayn't I? I heard your sister say he was coming round now." "Oh, I see," she ejaculated. "Her father. We are only stepsisters. My father died 7 years ago." The end.